What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show here on Sherdog.com, and today I am looking ahead to the month of February and my top 5 fights from the month. We did it last month with a kind of a shortened January, I suppose, considering we didn't get going for a long time into the month, but there's a lot more to choose from. In February, there's a lot of fun fights, and the 5 fights I've picked out here are very different. In a lot of fun ways, I suppose. We have, fighters at the end of their career, fighters in the prime of their career, and one fighter who is at the start of their career again, if you want to put it that way. But we will get to all that. First thing I want to say, actually, before I get into all of these, so Bellator Dublin is on in February, and I haven't picked the fight from Bellator Dublin, and I think it's for two reasons here, right? So the first reason, and usually I'd always try in a bit of Irish bias here, considering I'm here in Ireland covering it, and it helps everyone. It's good for me, it's good for everyone, and I think people enjoy those Irish cards, whether it's Bellator, KHR's coming up, PFL coming up as well, or obviously the UFC back in the day as well when they cared about Ireland. The first part is I'll obviously be covering a lot as we get closer to the card, and I'll be maybe more dedicated to it, dedicated to the coverage in. But also, it's just like it's hard to get, as someone in Ireland here covering this card, it's kind of hard to get pumped for that one. Especially, I just think the main event is a very, very good fight. Maybe not a great fight for Ireland, and maybe won't be like an amazing fight. The first one was obviously a very tough battle, and we're expecting a tough battle there. I don't think anyone's expecting a barn burner. We might be expecting a high-level, close wrestling match, possibly. But the rest of the card, it just feels like a lot of the Irish fighters on the card are not being kind of matched in the way they were previously. Like Bellator in the last 2 cards especially have done a great job of matching the Irish fighters, and it just feels it's not really the case on this one. There's also like James Gallagher is fighting Leandro Higo, but it's not in the Irish card. The perfect fight seemed to be Brian Moore versus Leandro Higo. Moore called him out, Higo accepted, and the fight didn't happen. Carl Moore was beat the number 6 ranked guy in his last fight. Now he's fighting a non-ranked guy who's beaten one of his teammates who's a very, very good fighter in his, I think his first or second maybe Bellator fight. It just, a lot of it I think makes very little sense. Now I'm sure we'll go and we'll enjoy it on the night, but that, that's I suppose my reasoning behind that. But as I said, the less maybe I stop thinking about the matchmaking, and the more I start thinking about the fun, I'll probably enjoy it more. So look out for that preview when it comes in the next couple of weeks. But there is some very good Bellator matchmaking this month, and the first fight I'm going for here, number 1, is Bader versus Fedor, February 4th at Bellator 290. And look, if you were to put this out as a fight, just stand alone by itself, it probably, wouldn't make this list normally, because it's very tough matchmaking, obviously, for Fedor. We've seen it before. We saw what happened before in it. Fedor hasn't, I was talking about Shogun there over the last while. And, if you look at Shogun's results over the last maybe 10 fights, he's, I don't know what this is, lost maybe 3 of them. Like, it's not like he's getting beaten all the time. He's winning a good few fights. He's not getting knocked out the whole time. And you could say the same, I think, for Fedor, even though when he's come up against, I suppose, the higher level opposition, it has gone that way. But he's not a guy who is getting like knocked out over and over and over. Is it the Fedor of his prime? Absolutely, obviously not. But I think it's, sometimes you see a guy like BJ Penn towards the end of his career, you couldn't enjoy it. Like Frankie Edgar for me for the last 2 or 3 years, a big Frankie Edgar fan, I couldn't really enjoy it. And that was a weird one as well, because a lot of people I think were denying it, where Frankie Edgar was in his career. But I think Fedor is the one we can still enjoy his fights, and we can still have fun watching his fights, even though, look, we all expect him to come into this fight and not have the best night of his life, and probably not, almost certainly not win. But still, do you know what? Recently, I especially like with the tough month we've had with Stephan Bonner dying, Victoria Lee dying, and all of that. Sometimes we need to just step back and appreciate a fighter for how great they are or how great they were. You know, I have a few of them up behind me here on my wall, and I try to do that. You know, I try to remain unbiased and all, but even like Kimbo there alongside me, who has passed away, or Anderson Silva, Demetrius Johnson, or Wonderboy, or MVP, I'm fans of their style, and I think McGregor's down there as well over as he is. Like, to appreciate the fighters, to appreciate the people who have done it down through the years is something that we do in MMA. It's not like we ignore it altogether, but we need to do better. I did a show for a while, and I'll continue to do it over in Severe MMA, called The Contender, where I look back, the Contender's one of them, but also career retrospective, where I look back at one of my colleagues over there at the careers of fighters, whether it's, say, even a guy say like Sakuraba, who, I was obviously very young when Sakuraba was coming up, and I didn't catch many of his fights live, I suppose, if only a couple in his prime anyway. And to go back and watch someone like that, it's brilliant to do it, and to just even like say someone like, a lot of people here in Sherdog, say someone like a Josh Gross could go back and do it and say, I remember this, I remember the build up, whereas I didn't have that, and I could still go back and appreciate someone like that. And like, I've been obviously doing this for a long time now, but let's say a fan who came into it now in the last 2 or 3 years, let's say they're a pandemic MMA fan, they could easily go back and watch the Fedor fights, or the Shogun fights, or the Sakuraba fights, or the Mark Coleman fights, or the even the Forrest Griffin, Stephan Bonner fights, and understand from their era how great they were, And I think you get shocked sometimes when you watch a guy like Fedor or a guy like Sakuraba, the level they actually were at for the time they were at as well. And the point here is, on this fight, maybe it'll give us an opportunity to do that. Maybe the week before or the week after, let's say the week after, even if Fedor lays his gloves down, and we do a career retrospective, or people are talking about him, and people saying, what was your favourite moment of Fedor's career? No MMA retirements or MMA retirements, even if he does retire, it isn't a sure sign that he won't be back. We all know that, but still, that doesn't even matter for this. I think just to appreciate someone, and just to realise how great of a fighter they were, and to point that out and to tell people, especially if you have a platform like this, or other people in the media as well as the fans, I think it's a big thing, right? So that's one side of it. But the other side of it as well, he has a massive opportunity here to end his illustrious career with yet another belt in a big promotion. We heard Dana White talking last week about Fedor as the one guy they missed out on, or the one guy they after Francis now, obviously, where they had issues coming to agreement. Now there's been a lot more. We'd Gilbert Melendez, who they ended up matching, and we had Randy Couture, and we had many more as well down through the years who they tried to sign. They couldn't even even recently there's been a couple. So don't buy that for 1 second. But Fedor has an opportunity here. He has an opportunity here to do that now. And for Ryan Bader as well, he's an opportunity to be the legend again. He's an opportunity to solidify himself, I suppose, as the heavyweight champion after losing the light heavyweight belt, with some contenders coming. Could Francis Ngannou be an ex-contender coming? Could this be an opportunity for Bader to finish Fedor and go, I beat the best heavyweight of all time, now I want to beat the best heavyweight today, Francis Ngannou, step up, just something like that. Now, I'm Ryan Bader, I probably don't want to fight Francis Ngannou, for being honest, but still, it's probably, would Bellator bring back pay-per-view and all for that? It could all lead to that. So I think that is definitely an interesting one to look at. The next fight is the night after, February 11th, at UFC 284, and it might be the fight of the year. Never mind the fight of the month. Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski, and I am unbelievably pumped for this fight. Like, I just cannot wait. I remember when TJ Dillashaw and Cody Garbrandt were supposed to be fighting. Now, if you look at TJ Dillashaw and Cody Garbrandt now, maybe you're thinking, what are you talking about, John? But at the time, I remember thinking, God almighty, there is very little chance of there being a more high level fight than this year or in the coming future. Now, At the time, I think I remember Cody Garbrandt did to Dominic Cruz. He was a high-level fighter. TJ Dillashaw, a high-level fighter for years and years and years. So I kind of, for the time that it was in, I stick by that. And, the fight itself turned out to be actually way less high-level in terms of a technical fight. It turned into an absolute barn burner of a fight, which I was very pleased with as well. It was great. But the point here being, I feel the same way about this fight. I look at this fight and think, even Gagne versus Jones that's coming up, which I think is a massive high-level fight, it is a heavyweight fight too. It's not the same. Like, we always talk about pound for pound, and Demetrius Johnson is the greatest pound for pound fighter of all time, and I will go to my grave telling you that unless someone better emerges. And I've said recently, the only one I've seen close is Alexander Volkanovski, and I mean that as well. But my point there is the smaller fighters, they're just better. They're just better in terms of technique. If they were blown up, if they could fight the same way they were, like if Volkanovski could fight at heavyweight the same way he does, he would destroy Ngannou, Gagne, John Jones all in the one night. And if Demetrius Johnson could, give him Fedor in his prime, give him Daniel Cormier in his prime, give him Junior Dos Santos, Ken Velasquez, and destroy every single one of them, right? And to look at these two fighters, right, at the lightweight and featherweight divisions, the champions, I just think the level of this is unbelievable. And you might think as well, right, okay, Makhachev, he's the next Khabib, he's a Dagestani wrestler, he's just going to try to go in and take everyone down. Look at his last fight. Look at previous fights. This guy can box. This guy can strike. He can hit. He's good, very good jiu-jitsu, obviously. Very good wrestling, very good control. He's a well-rounded fighter. Look at Volkanovski and go, you know what? He's just a striker. Was he just a striker when he got caught in a guillotine by Brian Ortega? Look how he got out of that. Look how he survived that and came along and used his striking to win the fight. And, he's wrestled people in the past. He's very, very good takedown defense. And you might say, he's smaller, but he fights long. There isn't a fighter in the UFC, in MMA, who fights as well long as Volkanovski. And I really think coming into this, we're talking about the intricacies of this fight, and we'll obviously talk about that more as it comes closer to it. But I think that's a big part of this, how long he fights. Because you might say, okay, he's small and, he could probably make 135, never mind 155. But he fights in such a way that I think it'll actually not hinder him as much as it would most people his size if they were going up a weight class. Now, he's coming up against one of the best fighters in the world as well, one of the best, wrestlers in MMA, in Islam Makhachev, who, in time, I think, will probably be rising up alongside Volkanovski in the pound-for-pound rankings. I think he's that good. This guy is a wizard of a fighter. He's absolutely brilliant. And, I think my pick is going to be Volkanovski, but that doesn't matter for the purpose of this show. Because this show is about looking forward to just great fights. God almighty, if you can't look forward to this. And as well, all right, if you're me and you're going to be breaking down this fight in 2 weeks' time or whatever, give your pick, give your argument and all. But if you're like me now and just looking forward to fights, or if you're, a fan watching this, don't go for the, Makhachev, too big of a wrestler. He's just going to beat him. He's just going to destroy him. This is one you say, oh my God, I can't wait for it. And maybe even if you're, talking yourself out of it, there is a logic to be said about Makhachev winning or about, you favouring someone and all. But there's also a logic to I can't believe how amazing of a fight we're actually getting here. I am so unbelievably pumped. I feel like sometimes it's a thing we don't do enough. I was talking to someone the other day as well. And I was kind of talking about looking forward to fights and being pumped up for fights, and the part of the show, and I'm going to continue to do the show because I think it helps me, it helps everyone maybe look forward to these fights in a more positive way, because sometimes we get very negative. But I remember the two fights I've looked forward to the most in my life, and I suppose it was maybe a little bit before I was covering MMA as a completely unbiasedly and completely as a media member, was Rampage Jackson versus John Jones and Chael Sonnen versus Anderson Silva 2. The level of excitement I had for them was just next level. Now, maybe I didn't understand at the time how good John Jones was and how maybe easily he would beat Rampage. And maybe that's the case for Makhachev versus Volkanovski, right? But we don't know that coming into it. We might guess it, we might think it. We don't know that coming into it. No, I was absolutely pumped for that fight. After watching the first Chael Sonnen Anderson Silva fight, after seeing all the shit talk, I was absolutely pumped for that fight. And the level of anticipation I had for that fight was massive. And there was nothing bad about that, right? There was nothing bad about that. And there's nothing bad about being massively excited for Makhachev versus Volkanovski, or for Lineker versus Andrade, or for my next fight, Vera versus Sandhagen, which is going down on February 18th at the UFC Fight Night. And this is another one. Like in the bantamweight division, they pop up all the time. These great fights. That maybe great fights you're not even expecting. And, you know, I was probably asked, like, in a Q&A or something the night after Sandhagen's last fight, the night after Vera's last fight, oh, would you like to see Vera versus Sandhagen? Would you like to see Sandhagen versus Vera? And I'd probably say, oh yeah, that's a good fight. And, you know, I press stop, posted the Q&A, and I was on to the next fight. Didn't really think about it much more after that. But now that it's sat here in front of me and I've looked through all the cards from the month and picked out a couple of fights, God almighty, what a fight this is. What a great fight this is. And the kind of the clash of, not even styles, but the clash of tactics I'm so interested in, because if you look at Chito Vera and the success he had in the font fight, wasn't it? Where he was like losing, winning at the end of the round. Losing, winning at the end of the round. Every single round. And to fight that nature of a fight is very, very tough to do, I think, in MMA. And the fact that he did it was unbelievable. Was absolutely brilliant to do that. And Sandhagen is the kind of the opposite of that. He is a guy who throws a lot out there. He looks for the big shot too, you know, but he throws a lot in between it. And I'm very interested to see if that kind of a lot in between plus a few big shots can be beaten or will beat the one big shot. Will Chito Vera even fight that way against someone like Sandhagen who fights the way he does? I'm so interested to see this fight. So interested to see it. And as well, you know, we look at the picture at the moment at 135 and you see like, okay, are they going to do the interim belt? Is it going to be Cejudo versus O'Malley? Is Cejudo going to get a title shot? Like, is Aljo going to be healthy and going to be back quick enough to fight it? What is it, 285 they want them to fight at or whatever it is? I know the talk at the moment. Like, whatever happens though, we look at light heavyweight. You never know what's going to happen, who's going to put themselves next in line. It's always good to win the fight and put yourself next in line, you know? I think it's always good to be in that conversation, and to be in that conversation, one of these guys is going to have to win. And I also think, like, you look at, do you know what? It is too maybe at a time unfashionable guys maybe. Like Sandhagen, my guy Spencer Guide always talks about him. He came out of the Contender Series around the same time as Sean O'Malley. He's fought much tougher opposition until recently than O'Malley. Okay, maybe he hasn't had total success in all of them, but sometimes we underappreciate how good and how willing to fight other fighters at the top level Sandhagen is. And look, we're doing it here again. And we kind of look at that as an old school trait, something that used to happen a long time ago. You know, I spoke about Stephan Bonner earlier. What was the number? I think it was 30% or something of his MMA fights ever were against UFC champions. That, like, incredible. Absolutely incredible. And you look at Sandhagen, and the level of guys he's fought has been incredible. You look at Vera, and he's a guy who not too long ago, people, myself included, even not necessarily straight up, or maybe calling him a journeyman, maybe saying he's not a guy who's going to get to that very top level. And now they have a chance. And it's not even that they have a chance. They have to still fight for that. You know, they have to still go in and have this fight against each other to prove that they are the guy ahead of the other guy. And they have no problem doing that, because that's the sort of fighters they are. They're proper fighters who are willing to go in and take the fights and take the chances to prove they are the best. And that's a big reason why this is on my list, and I really, really can't wait for it. I think it's going to be a very, very good fight, and I look forward to it. And my last fight for the month of February 25th at UFC Fight Night, it's Montana De La Rosa against the returning Tatiana Suarez. Now, if you're I'll say a Pandemic fan, or maybe even watching a little bit longer than that, welcome, and I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you're a fan of MMA. But you might not know Tatiana Suarez. You might have heard the name. You might have gone back and watched a couple of her fights. But the level of hype, the level of intrigue around Tatiana Suarez on her way up was massive. She had a great story as well. She was a cancer survivor, wasn't she, if I'm not mistaken? An unbelievable wrestler. People were basically saying, me included as well, so it's not just, I'm not saying this was just other people saying this, or this was the thought. I believed it as well myself, that she was like the female Habib. She was the next one on the way up, going to absolutely decimate people. And then she's had just a horrendous time out for, it feels like about 5 years. It's probably, probably about 2.5 or 3 years, something like that, with injury. There's talks of her coming back at different stages over and over and over. Maybe she even had one fight booked at a certain point. I can't really remember, but she has been out for a long time. And now she's coming back. And I said at the start of this, we're talking about the start of people's careers. It feels like this is the start of Tatiana Suarez's career again. It really does. And you know what? I can't wait for it, because you look at someone like Habib is the name I spoke about there. When Habib was on the way up, we all knew it. We all knew he was going to be the guy. Makhachev, we all knew it on the way up, that he was going to be the guy, just so great. And Tatiana Suarez was another one like that. Say like Zabit is another one as well, who's, had his career robbed from him through it looks like injury and things. And it looked for a good while like Tatiana Suarez. TJ Grant is another one who is on the verge of a title shot at lightweight, wasn't it? It was lightweight, wasn't it? Yeah. And was robbed, concussion robbed him of his career. And I'm so glad to see someone like Tatiana Suarez back. So glad. Now, if this was a fighter who didn't even have that level of, intrigue or level of hype around them, I would still say that. But let's lay that to the side for a second. Let's talk about that level of hype, and let's appreciate that we have a fighter coming in here who is one of the most hyped fighters with good reason ever, especially in women's MMA. Like you obviously have Rousey, and you have whoever else, Cyborg and things like that. A lot of them were kind of were, I suppose, hyped already before they came to the UFC. Like Cyborg, obviously, massively, Ronda Rousey as well. Then you had people emerge and become champions and all that, which was absolutely great. But I felt like Tatiana is one of the first, oh, here we go. She's only a few fights into her career. She's going to destroy everyone. Like we have with Bo Nickel now, like we had with Chimaev. That's what Suarez was. If you weren't around at the time, trust me, and I don't think many people, let me know in the comment section below, I don't think many people would disagree with that in terms of the hype levels. If she can come out here and beat Montana De La Rosa, that will start again. And I, for one, I'll be straight on that bandwagon. I'll be jumping on that bandwagon. And you know what? I think a lot of people will be so happy for her. We'd be happy for ourselves too, because we want great fighters, and there's no doubt about it. She is a great fighter. So February 25th, the comeback of Tatiana Suarez against, and fair play to Montana De La Rosa as well. I may talk about that very one-sidedly there, but she stepped up and she's fighting this really, really monstrous fighter in terms of her ability, and fair play to her for stepping up and taking that fight. And she'll see this as a big opportunity too, so a massive fight there, and I absolutely can't wait. Right, so my next fight is also from UFC 284, and it is the interim featherweight strap as Yair Rodriguez takes on Josh Emmett for obviously the belt that the guy in the main event is currently holding, and not that belt, I suppose, the interim belt. Now, I've been a big advocate, I suppose, for years for not actually going mad about interim belts and not making a big deal about them. I think people go overboard, and I know I'm in the minority on that, and I'm happy to be in the minority on that. I have no problem arguing my side with that. I understand other people's side, and this one, in a way, I'm kind of on the other people's side a little bit, because the guy who has the main title is fighting on the same card, so it's definitely a little bit weird. There's no denying it with this one. And a bigger problem, I think, with this one as well is that this fight... Now, I'm giving the negatives of this first, right? So I will get to the positives in a second. The biggest problem with this fight is I don't think it's the right fight to make for the interim belt. And look, the reason for that is obviously... Yair Rodriguez. He's on a 1-fight win streak. That was a shoulder injury against Brian Ortega. He lost decisively to Max Holloway before that. And his previous fight before that was in 2019. So, like, in 4 years, he basically has 0 good wins, you know? And he's getting an interim title shot. I honestly have no idea why. I have no idea why. Now, maybe it's because Arnold Allen is injured and he couldn't take it on this date. And if that's the case, fair enough. You know, fair enough. But Arnold Allen was the one who deserved that. So, from that point of view, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So I got to the negatives there, but these are my favourite fights. And the reason I'm putting it in here is this, and I've made this proclamation a few years ago, and I have to constantly remind myself of it, but in MMA, if you give me a good fight, I'll take it, you know? Sometimes we like to complain it doesn't make sense, it's not the right fight, it's not the right placing, it's not the right card, it's not the right time. But also, if you give me a good fight, which this is, I'll take it, and I'll take this fight and I'll watch it. I'm really looking forward to it. So I think sometimes you have to change your mindset. Like I spoke about the Irish card coming up. It's not the best card in the world, but when we get there and we'll be sitting there on the 24th of February, I'm gonna really enjoy it. Like I do all of these fight cards that I attend, and I'm sure the same with a lot of people. Or we're sitting at home watching it turns into a great fight. With all due respect to the likes of Aaron Allen, who I've argued for a long time for this, we're like not thinking of that at that time. We're just enjoying the fight. And when we're looking ahead to this, I think we should do that too. And with like respect to the fighters as well, we need to do that because it's not their fault that they've been given it. You know, it's a plus for them. And a lot of fighters, you know, throughout their career don't get many plus points in terms of being given stuff. You know, they're like being given good money, being given good matchmaking, being given good placement on cards. It's rare enough. So for these to get it, I think both of them are good guys. From what I know, I don't know too much about them, but they seem like good guys and they seem to deserve it. Plus, I'll say it again, that fight is a really, really good fight. Look at Josh Emmett, he deserves it. He deserves to be in this spot. He's on a great run at the moment. Beat Calvin Kattar last time out. Very close one, but he beat Dan Ige before that, beating Shane Burgos as well, after beating Bektic and Johnson, and that goes back to 2019. So around the same time that Yair Rodriguez hasn't really been that active, Emmett has been very, very active, after being out for a while previously. He went from February 2018 until March 2019 without a fight, so over a year out of the cage, but he's bounced back well since that, and even during the pandemic, he had a fight in the middle of 2020. He had one, I suppose he was maybe 11 months out of the cage around into, yeah, but with the pandemic, that's no fault of anyone's, I suppose, but it's great to see him back here. Now, the fight itself, and look, we'll do more, this is not really a podcast for in-depth breakdowns or anything like that, and we will do more of that as it comes up, obviously over on Sheehan and Duffy, and I'm sure I'll talk about it in the betting show and elsewhere as well when that card comes up. But for me, the joy in this is really like, okay, Josh Emmett can wrestle and he can wrestle well, and we've we've seen Yair's wrestling. I suppose I'd like to say it's improved over the years. We've barely seen him in the last 4 years, but we've seen it improve somewhat. But we've also seen the issues with it. How will that work out is one part of it. But the part I'm looking forward to, I suppose, is like, even though Josh Emmett is coming off of 3 decisions in a row, he is a guy with kind of blistering power when he wants to throw it. He has big power and he can land big power. And we remember was it the Jeremy Stevens fight where he got knocked out hard as well? And I'm kind of looking at that like technical boxer as he tries to be, or technical kickboxer as Josh Emmett tries to be, against like the kind of the karateka or whatever you want to call it, the point fighting type of fighter that Yair Rodriguez is, standing in his sideward stance and throwing his front kicks and things like that. I love, like you can see by that lad right up there alongside me, and even that lad there, and I don't know if you can see the one right here or not, maybe it's off a camera, but MVP's over there. I love those sort of fighters. Those are my sort of fighters. And you know why I love them? I love them because they come up against sort of fighters like Josh Emmett, and it leads to a different sort of matchup, a fun sort of matchup. a sort of thing we don't really see all that often in MMA because those unique styles are still there. You know, whether it's, you know, when Pettis came in, we were talking about him being a Taekwondo artist, or Wonderboy, or before that Lyoto, and you know, from day dot in the UFC, we had like the Clash of Styles thing was the big question: which class of styles would win, and it's a throwback to that, I suppose, in some sort of way. And you know what? I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to it for that alone, but for the fight itself, I really like both of these guys. I think they're two good fighters. As I said, okay, maybe it doesn't make the most sense in the world, but if this fight was just to happen, and let's say it's a number one contender fight or whatever, I think we'd be happy enough with it. So it's going to be a good fight. I'm really looking forward to it. And yeah, that card at UFC 284 is really shaping up to be a very, very good card. Right, so those are my 5 fights for the month of February. So we'll, just to recap, Bader versus Fedor, February 4th at Bellator 290. Then we have the 2 title fights, one for the interim belt, obviously on 284 on February 11th. That's Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski, and then Yair Rodriguez versus Josh Emmett. The 4th fight, Vera versus Sandhagen on February 18th at the UFC Fight Night, and then Tatiana Suarez versus Montana De La Rosa on February 25th at UFC Fight Night as well. Plus we have all the Irish fights, which I'm sure I gave out about a little bit, but I really enjoy as well, and I'll be there covering them, so I can't wait. Can't really wait for the whole month of February. It should be a fun month, and those are 5 fights to kind of whet your appetite for that month. All right, I'll leave it there. Thank you to everybody for listening and watching. My name is Sheehan for Sherdog.com, and I'll see you all next time.